Hello everyone, and welcome to another video tutorial about the visual arts content areas. This video is going to focus on the conceptual framework. So enjoy! Alright, well, firstly let's have a look at the conceptual framework and what it is and what it's made up of. To sort of break it down as much as I can, the conceptual framework is made up of 4 components or agencies. Remember that word, okay? Agencies. These include the artist. My little French guy there, way to be stereotypical. Artworks, audience, and the world. Now, you will need to be able to understand each of these agencies individually, so on their own merit, as well as the relationship between them. You will need to be able to look at how these 4 agencies interact with one another, relate to one another, inspire, influence, impact. Alright, and it is through the study of these different relationships that are at play that bring you to a greater and more deeper understanding of the artists and artworks that you study. Alright, so we'll begin by looking at each of these agencies individually, hopefully so you can get an understanding of what it means and what information you're looking for when you're dealing with each particular agency. I do advise that you stop this video whenever you need to in order to construct your own notes about each agency. Try and put them into your own words, right? It'd be far more beneficial for you. Right, so let's get started. We'll begin with the artist, okay, the creator of the artworks. To water it down, I suppose, when you're looking at the artist, you're looking at the who, what, how, and why. Alright, in terms of the who, you're looking at who the artist is. Alright, this can be, well, hold on, let's stop that. An artist can be anyone, really. So they can be known as an artist, but they could also be a craftsperson, a designer, an architect. Right, all of these people would come under the little artist umbrella. Okay, it can also refer to individuals. It can refer to a group or a collaboration of artists, school, or an art movement. Okay, so you could talk about artists collectively because they all fall under surrealism, for example. Okay, so that sort of introduces you to who the artist is. Alright, if you were to study the artist based on that, you would be looking at just their general sort of biographical information, so who they are, where they came from, when they were working, just to sort of get a feel of who they are as a person or who they are as a group. In terms of the what, alright, the artists, they process ideas and concepts, alright, so that is almost their job and their role, so they're attempting to bring these ideas to life, alright, and how they do that is through their techniques and their, actual physical processes that allow them to bring the ideas that they had into sort of a physical or virtual or material object that is the artwork. Right, it is important for you to realize that sometimes their technique or the process that they go through can be culturally determined by the society that they live in, alright, and the different traditions that are at play during that time. So you are taking into account what is influencing them and the way they go about creating art. I hope I'm not talking too fast. I'm sorry, I get a little bit pumped about this sort of stuff. But slowing it down. The why. You're looking at their intentions, okay? So why they create artworks, for what purpose, for what function are they doing that? And it's the intentions of the artist that, in a way, are the most important, right? If you can understand the reason behind their ideas and their art making process, then it gives you'll be able to give a lot more insight into the artworks that you're dealing with. Okay, so that's the artist, alright? Who, what, how, and why. that brings us to artwork. So, agency of the conceptual framework, you are looking at a product, I suppose. And this could be physical, material, virtual. Okay, in terms of its form, you can look at it as art, as craft, even as design. And as you well know from your own practice, you may be exploring 2D, 3D, or 4D artworks. Now, from your study, hopefully you are learning that artworks come in many shapes and sizes and are very, very different. There are a lot of different things that can be considered art. Even looking at the examples that I've provided, we've got the sculpture of David, 3D, but then we go over to a 2D painting by Edvard Munch, The Scream. All right, we've got Gilbert and George down the far right-hand side there as living sculptures, performance art. The artist is, in fact, the artwork. And then on the far left corner, we have Christo and Jean-Claude wrapping coastlines. So you can see that there are a lot of different types of artworks, sort of, just kicking it around in our world. But what you're looking at with the artwork is, what are you seeing? You're attempting to deconstruct the visual features that are evident within these artworks in order to identify how they are a reflection of an idea, how they could represent a personal response of the artist, a cultural viewpoint, how they're a symbolic representation or a cultural reinterpretation of the world. So, it is that product, as I said before, that allows you to gain insight into the world at the time, the artist who created it. Okay, so the artwork is almost the most important agency of the conceptual framework, because this is what you're looking at. This is where all your evidence comes from. Crazy birds outside. Audience, the third agency of the conceptual framework, are a body of critical consumers. All right, in terms of who are they? Well, the audience is made up of everyone from art critics, art historians, to students like yourself, to teachers like me, members of the general public. Anyone who views the artwork is an audience member. Okay, what is important to recognise, though, is that audiences change over time. Alright, so think about the artworks that were made long before we were even on this planet, and how we interpret those artworks differently to, the audience that were viewing it when it was made, purely because of the time that we live in and what is normal to us, I suppose. So what I'm trying to say is that audience, because they change over time, the way the artworks are interpreted also change over time. To help us out with that are, of course, our art historians and art critics, the source of guidance for us as students, because they compare old words about the artworks with the way that we talk about them today. So they allow the compare and contrast for us to shed light on how these interpretations are changing over time. When you're dealing with the audience as an agency, you are looking predominantly at, who it is, who's responding to it, but how the audience brings different meanings to artworks over time. And there's a spelling mistake. Great. Being. Let's change that. Bring. There we go. Done. Puppy. World. Well, as far as the world goes, you're looking at the idea that artworks are a representation of the world in which they were created. Alright, artworks, they represent interest in the world. Now, this could be the personal experience of the artist. It could also refer to ideas of class systems within a society, any ideology that is going on at the time. So what is considered appropriate or traditional, that endless debate of what is art, okay? Any type of events of significance also play a pivotal role in the creation of artworks, okay? So you've got major events like the Sydney Olympics, World War I, II, any war, in fact, Beatlemania, the British invasion had, and continue to have a massive effect on the music industry. And the same sort of thing is evident in art. It's like when we talk about Marcel Duchamp as the forerunner of postmodern art. He continues to this day to have an influence on artists. So when you're studying the artwork, you could be looking at how interests in the world are evident. So how there are symbolic links to whatever's happening in the world at the time. I'm getting distracted by the Beatles. Let's just turn that down a little bit. Alright, so essentially you're just looking at whether or not the artist is commenting on the world, and if they are, what element of the world are they commenting on, alright, and how their viewpoint is not only evident, but represented within the artwork. Okay, so that wraps up each of the agencies individually. Alright, but you will often be asked to look at the relationship between two or more of these agencies. So you need to at least attempt to find the connection between, what you're finding out about the artist and what you know about their artworks, or what you know about the audience reaction to the artwork, or the world, its influence on the artist, and by extension the artwork. So I suppose, look, for me, I found it quite helpful to think about it in this way. Firstly, things go on in the world. Okay, events, they happen. Now, what is going on in the world, whether it be the entire world or, in that little small community in which the artist is living, it will influence or inspire the artist in some way. And that inspiration is translated into the creation of that product known as the artwork. So the artwork becomes that physical representation of the artist's ideas that were inspired by the work. Now, the audience views that artwork and responds to it. Okay, and that response by the audience can either filter back into the world, or is sort of dictated to by the world because of the values that are sort of evident at the time. And the audience reaction in turn can impact upon the artist and the type of works they create. So, look, hopefully that was helpful and didn't confuse you further. If it did, just forget everything that I just said. But do note that it is important for you to have, I suppose, your own understanding of how these four agencies relate to one another, so that you can apply it to the artists that you study. Also, remember that even if you are only looking at two of the agencies, for example, artist and world, you will still need to refer to the artwork, because the artwork is where you find that evidence to support your argument. So be mindful of the fact that the artwork is usually always included, even when it's not specifically mentioned. Okay, so it's time to test your knowledge. On the following slides are some example HSC style conceptual framework questions. What you will need to do is to pause each slide and write out the questions, and then I want you to identify which agencies are being presented within that question. You're looking for key words that you could associate with either artist, artwork, audience, or world. Okay, so just write down which agencies you would have to explore in order to answer that question. Good luck! Okay, if you didn't pause the video, you might want to do it now because the slide is about to change to new questions. Pause, pause, pause. Alright, just a warning, if you haven't paused this slide, it's going to change again. Pause it, pause it, pause it. Okay, so let's have a look at the answers and see how you did. If you haven't completed it, please don't look at this yet. Alright, question 1. Contemporary audiences often expect to be stimulated or entertained when engaging with artworks. Alright, so you've given a quote first up. Okay. The question then asks you to explain how audience expectations influence the intentions of the artists. Okay, so this one's pretty easy because you are given the terms themselves. You've got audience and you've got artists. So with this question, in order to answer it, you'll be looking at the relationship between audience and artists, but of course how it's represented in the artworks that they create. Okay. Question 2, to what extent do audiences need art galleries to view artworks? Okay, again, you're given the key terms of audience and artworks. Now, what you're not given directly though is the fact that art galleries are part of the world. Okay, so you're looking at the relationship between audience and artworks, but the placement of the artworks may not necessarily be in an art gallery and therefore would be part of the world. Okay, so you do need to pick up on slight language sort of tricks within the question on that one. Alright, so that's a relationship between artworks, audience and world for question 2. Question 3. Explain how artists can borrow concepts and approaches, really good speller right now, approaches from other artists and yet their artworks are still regarded as original. Now, you're given artists, which is great, okay, but you're not actually given any other direct words from the agencies, so you'll be looking again for language tricks. Alright, for this one, other artists is your key. Okay, because other artists is a worldly influence. Okay, so you're looking at the relationship between artists and world. Question 4. Discuss how digital media challenges the ways in which audiences experience artworks. In your answer, refer to relevant examples. Okay, again, you're given the term audience, which is great, but what other agency is evident within the question? Alright, hopefully you have picked up that digital media is a form of artwork, but it also is a link to world because it is a development. Alright, we didn't have digital media in the past because technology advancements hadn't been made. Okay, so in this one you are actually looking for the relationship between artwork, world and audience. Okay. Question 5. Explain how particular artworks and or exhibitions of art have caused changes in the art world beliefs and practices. Okay, this one, aren't you lucky you get artworks and you get art world. Okay, so you are looking at the relationship between artworks and world. Alright, question 6. You're provided with a statement. Artists deliberately set out to provoke audience reactions. Argue a case both for and against this statement. This is different to the other questions because the key words are actually presented to you within the statement. And it is artists and audience. Alright, so you're looking at the relationship between artists and audience when dealing with this question. Okay, question 7, I'm going to change it to green because I want it to be green. Evaluate the importance of artists' intentions in the production and meaning of artworks. Okay, hopefully you're starting to get the idea with these and you picked up artists and artworks. Alright, so you're looking at the relationship between artist and artworks. Question 8. Consider the following view. Artists often say what would otherwise remain unsaid. Discuss this view using examples of artists whose functional role is to challenge mainstream values. Now, artist is given to you, fantastic, alright, but relationship to what? Mainstream values, okay, and mainstream values is part of the world. Alright, mainstream values is looking at what is traditionally accepted, okay, or considered normal, I suppose, or appropriate. Alright, so question 8 is another example where you will not necessarily be given the exact word of the agency and you need to try and identify it. Alright, question 9. Examine how artworks exist as a representation of artists' ideas. Number 9's a nice one for you. Artworks and artists. Alright, relationship between artworks and artists. Alright, number 10. Evaluate how artists reveal and or conceal the identity of artists. Again, question 10's been very kind to you. Artworks, artists. Alright, you're looking at the relationship between artworks and artists. Okay, now this is the first step for breaking down conceptual framework questions. So you want to know which agencies you're dealing with, okay? But once you've done that and you start exploring it in your answer, do make sure that you are relating it to, the question as a whole. Alright, that identifying the agencies that you're dealing with is just your way in to the question. Alright, we'll pick that up and explore that a little bit more later. Okay, but I do advise that you practice these skills, so have a look at any past papers and go to the conceptual framework questions and see if you can pull them apart just the way you have done here. Well, that wraps up our conceptual framework tutorial. Hopefully you have found it helpful to your understanding of the conceptual framework and what it is and how you can use it. If not, please let me know so I can make it better in the future. Farewell. Ciao.